This is the Mirror Moves, where every outrageous HOA tale comes with a twist you won't see coming. If you love watching entitled power trips crash and burn, hit subscribe so you never miss a story. Today's story is about an entitled neighbor decided my cabin should be hers for the weekend, so I stood my ground. What followed was a full-blown meltdown, a police visit, and the most dramatic exit you've ever seen. Let's dive in. When I bought my cabin, there is for only one reason: peace. It's tucked away at the edge of the lake, surrounded by pines that sway just enough to drown out the noise of city life. When I'm here, I'm not John from work or that guy in the HOA. I'm just me. The cabin is my reset button. That's why it caught me off guard when, on a random Thursday afternoon, I heard a knock on my front door. Not the polite kind. 3 sharp bangs, each one like it owned the place. I opened it to find her. Karen. For context, Karen isn't her real name, but if you've ever dealt with a Karen, you know the type. Perfectly styled hair, phone always in hand, and a smile that says, "I'm about to ask for something outrageous." She skipped the small talk. So, I was thinking my family and I are planning a little weekend getaway, and we figured, since her cabin is just sitting here, we could use it. I blinked, waiting for her to laugh. She didn't. "You mean, rent it?" I asked. "Oh no, no need for that. We're neighbors. Neighbors help each other out." Now, I like helping people, but my brain immediately flashed through all the possibilities. They trash the place. Something breaks. They find my stash of fishing gear and accidentally take it home. I kept my tone even. "I'm sorry, but the cabin isn't available. I've got plans for it." Karen tilted her head like she'd just been told the sky was green. "But you're not even using it this weekend, right?" "That's not really the point," I said. "It's private property." Her smile tightened. "Well, that's not very neighborly. I mean, we live in the same community. The HOA is all about sharing resources." That's when I felt it, the first ripple of trouble. If Karen was invoking the HOA, this wasn't just a casual request. This was her planting a flag. I told her again, politely but firmly, it's not happening. Her eyes narrowed just a little. We'll see about that." And with that, she turned on her heel and walked away, her phone already in her hand, thumbs tapping furiously. I shut the door, exhaled, and muttered to myself, "Well, that's going to be a thing." The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. At first, I thought it was spam. Then I saw the HOA group chat lighting up like a Christmas tree. "Karen, some people in this neighborhood clearly think they're above helping others." Sod. Another neighbor, "What happened?" Karen, "I asked to borrow a cabin that's literally in use this weekend, and I got a rude no. Guess generosity is dead." She didn't tag me, but everyone knew who she was talking about. Half the comments were the usual HOA peanut gallery agreeing with her. The other half stayed quiet, which in HOA terms is just as bad as agreeing. By noon, I had 3 voicemails from the HOA president, Roger. Roger's the kind of guy who starts every sentence with, "We're all a family here," right before asking you to do something you don't want to do. When I called him back, his tone was all sugary diplomacy. "Hey, buddy, listen, I hear there's a little misunderstanding with Karen. We just want to keep the peace, you know? Maybe let her use the cabin, just this once." I could feel my jaw tightening. "Roger, it's my cabin." My answer's no. A pause. Then, his voice dropped just enough to sound like a warning. "You know, the HOA does have certain expectations for community cooperation. I'd hate for this to become a formal issue." And there it was, the thinly veiled threat. I'd seen it before. They can't legally force you to hand over your property, but they can make your life miserable in 100 small ways. Surprise inspection. Petty violation letters. Suddenly, losing your parking permit. I told him, if there's a rule that says I have to hand over my cabin, I'd love to see it in writing. Silence. Then a fake chuckle. Of course, just trying to help smooth things over. I'll let Karen know. But I knew Karen wouldn't take this as the end. And I was right. That evening, I looked out my window and saw her standing in my driveway. Phone in one hand, sunglasses on even though the sun was setting. She was snapping pictures of my cabin like it was a crime scene. When I stepped outside, she smiled in that condescending way only Karens can, just documenting the condition. in case the HOA needs to reassess your compliance. I didn't rise to the bait. Karen, you're trespassing. Please leave. Her smile didn't fade. Oh, don't worry. I'll leave, but I'll be back. And next time, I won't be alone. And just like that, she strutted off into the twilight, heels clicking on the gravel. It happened 2 days later, just when I thought maybe Karen had decided to let it go. I was making coffee, staring out at the lake, when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. At first, I thought it was a delivery truck. Then I saw 2 police cruisers pull up in front of my cabin. And behind them, Karen, in full suburban battle armor, oversized sun hat, flowy scarf, and an expression like she was leading a war crimes tribunal. I stepped out onto the porch, mug still in hand. The taller officer walked up first. Sir, we got a report about a possible squatter in this property. I almost choked on my coffee. A what? Karen stepped forward before I could say another word. That's my weekend cabin. He's refusing to let me in. He doesn't even live here full time. I do. He's squatting. I raised an eyebrow. Karen, I own this cabin. It's in my name. You've seen me here for years. But she wasn't looking at me anymore. She was giving the officers her best trembling lip performance. I was supposed to host a charity retreat for underprivileged women, and now he's ruining everything. I told the HOA, but they wouldn't do anything. Please, you have to help. The shorter officer looked tired. Ma'am, do you have any legal documentation proving ownership or tenancy? Karen blinked like the question had personally offended her. Well, no, but everyone knows I use this place every summer. I couldn't help myself, I laughed. Using it and owning it are 2 different things. Would you like to see the deed, officers? 5 minutes later, I was inside, pulling out a neatly labeled folder from my desk. Deed, tax receipts, HOA payment history, everything. The officers barely glanced at them before one turned to Karen. Ma'am, this appears to be his property. You can't force him to let you in. Karen's face flushed an alarming shade of crimson. This is ridiculous. He's lying. The HOA will back me up. The taller officer's voice went flat. Ma'am, unless you can prove otherwise, you're trespassing. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. You could see the exact moment she realized she'd lost. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She spun on her heel and marched back to her car, but not before hissing, "This isn't over." The cops gave me a quick nod and left. As I watched the cruisers drive away, a breeze rustled through the trees. The cabin was quiet again. Too quiet. Because I knew, in the world of HOA politics, when someone like Karen says this isn't over, it's not. I should have known the silence was just the storm taking a deep breath. 3 days after the cops told Karen to pack it up, I got my first official letter from the HOA. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and carried that smug little embossed logo. The kind that screams we have nothing better to do than ruin your afternoon. Inside, a 3-page notice of violation listing every petty infraction they could scrape together. Grass height exceeds HOA regulation. Exterior paint showing signs of weathering. Dock not an approved stain color. I laughed out loud. My dock. The same dock that had been the same color for 10 years. Suddenly a crime against the neighborhood. But it didn't stop there. The next day, I found my trash bins mysteriously tipped over, with the contents helpfully scattered across the driveway. Then, the sprinkler system, which had worked perfectly all summer, started going off at random times, like 3 in the morning. Coincidence? Not when you know Karen. I caught her one afternoon power walking past my cabin. Phone pressed to her ear, throwing me glances that could cut glass. As I stepped outside, she spoke louder. Yes, I think a fine of at least $500 is appropriate. Maybe per day. She smiled, that slow, cat-like smile of someone enjoying their own private joke, and kept walking. It became a daily siege. More violation notices. Anonymous complaints to the county about unlicensed rentals, which I didn't even do. One letter accused me of operating a boat repair business from my driveway. For the record, it was just me fixing the hinge on my kayak. The HOA meetings were worse. I showed up once, hoping to defend myself, but the room was already stacked. Karen sat in the front row like a queen on her throne, surrounded by her little court of retirees with matching visors and clipboards. Every time I spoke, someone would politely interrupt with, "Well, according to our bylaws." It was a slow, grinding war, not meant to win in one blow, but to wear me down until I either sold the cabin or begged for her mercy. But here's the thing Karen didn't know. I am stubborn, dangerously stubborn. And if she won a long game, I was more than ready to play it. If Karen wanted a war of attrition, she picked the wrong battlefield. See, this wasn't just some vacation cabin to me. It was my fortress, my slice of peace. And I wasn't about to let a HOA queen with a superiority complex bulldoze it. The first thing I did, I went full compliance ninja. Every blade of grass in my yard was trimmed to exactly 2.5 inches. I measured with a ruler. Exterior paint, retouched and sealed until it gleamed like the hull of a yacht. Stein. I printed out the HOA's exact approved color code, drove 40 miles to get the right can, and even kept the receipt taped to my front door, just in case she felt frisky with another violation. But that was just the opening move. I started showing up at every HOA meeting, clipboard in hand, camera rolling. Whenever Karen tried to slide in a little rule adjustment that just happened to benefit her property or her friends, I'd raise my hand. "Excuse me, could you clarify which bylaw that falls under? For the record." Oh, she hated that. Her smile would tighten, her voice go brittle. But with the whole room watching, she had to answer. Then I dug into public records. Turns out, Karen's own deck extension never got a permit. Her guest house in the backyard, listed as a shed. And the kicker, the HOA bylaws required unanimous board approval for any structural change, which she'd never gotten. I didn't threaten her with it right away. No, I let her stew. Every time she dropped another violation notice on my doorstep, I'd wave and say, "Oh, by the way, Karen, I've been doing some fascinating reading about property codes. You'd love it." Meanwhile, I made friends with the other neighbors she'd ticked off over the years. Turns out, I wasn't the only target of her crusades. We started comparing notes, sharing copies of our violation letters, even swapping ideas for the next HOA meeting. What began as her little empire was turning into a rebellion, and I was more than happy to lead it. The turning point came when I caught her trespassing. I was on my porch, coffee in hand, when I saw her marching across my side yard with a tape measure, muttering about setback violations. I snapped photos, timestamp and all, sent them to the HOA board and the county sheriff's office in one neat little email. Funny thing, no violation notices after that. Karen still tries to throw her weight around, but the magic's gone. The other board members don't back her as much, and she avoids eye contact with me at meetings. And me? I sit there, sipping my coffee, enjoying the view of my perfectly legal cabin, knowing she'll never admit it, but she lost. That's all. If you enjoyed watching this chaos unfold, smash the subscribe button to the Mirror Moves for more outrageous neighbor stories and satisfying justice served fresh. See you next time.